All right, today is review day. I have your final right here. I am going to go down this item by item and tell you everything that I see on here that you'll need to know, aside from just giving you the actual problems, which I won't do, but I'll tell you all the highlights of this test. And then that'll probably take 15, 20 minutes maybe. And then the rest of the hour I have a practice test for you to take, which is similar to the final that you'll actually be taking tomorrow. And then the last maybe 15, 20 minutes, I will put the answers up there. Again, it's all multiple choice. You can run down through the list and check and see how many you have right or wrong. You will not be allowed to take a practice test home, so it's just how much you can get done in here, glancing down through it, do as much as you can. If you know exactly how to do a problem, I probably wouldn't do that one. I'd go on to something else, and then if you have time later, you could come back and finish. So that's the plan. So looking at your final, you have several problems of evaluate and simplify. That means they're probably not going to be equations. So I would be writing this stuff down. I'll probably write some example problems up here on some of these things as we go. Evaluate and simplify. What does that mean? Most of the time, combine like terms. That's what that's talking about. I would if I knew right off the top of my head. Combining like terms. So you might have 3x plus 4 plus 5x minus 6. You combine the x's and the constant numbers. So make sure you're able to do that. There are several problems on here that are just that. There's no equal sign. Just simplify it as much as you can. Solving equations, quite a few of those. And what does it mean to solve an equation? What's the goal? Get the variable by itself. So you might have to distribute. You're probably going to have to combine some like terms. You may have more than one variable. You may have 2 or 3 x's in there or y's in there. And you have to combine those all and get it isolated on one side. Basic equation solving. That shouldn't be any problem at Algebra 2 level. You have solving inequalities. Now, the inequalities can be a regular inequality, or they can be compound. What are the two types of compound inequality? And and or conjunctions and disjunctions, however you look at that. So and or inequalities. Now that's where a lot of confusion comes in, because the next thing you have with these equations and inequalities are what? What was the next level of that made it more difficult? Not graphing. Absolute value. And I'll combine this one. Solving absolute value equations and inequalities. So on your test, you have to look at the question, determine if it's just an equation or just an inequality that doesn't have any absolute value. You don't worry about the rules of absolute value, obviously, if it doesn't have an absolute value in it. But if it does have absolute value, you need to know how to deal with that. So I'll put 3 examples up here using the same numbers. If you have x plus 5, absolute value of x plus 5 equals 6, for instance. That would be an absolute value equation. Any of these absolute value equations or inequalities, you have to split them up or at least change them. You have to do either an equation or an and or compound inequality. So this one we would split up x plus 5 equals 6 or x plus 5 equals negative 6. You always have to do that with absolute value equations. This one we always get Most of you, not most, some of you just look at that absolute value, subtract the 5, and you get x equals 1, which is correct, but that's only half the answer. And I can almost guarantee you this will be one of the possibilities, one of your multiple choice answers. So if you just solve that right there and mark that, that's going to be incorrect. You have to remember to split that up. So another possibility is x plus 5 is less than 6. So now it is a inequality, same numbers, just a different sign in between. So what does less than mean? Is that an and or an or? That is an and. A lot of you probably don't know that by looking. However you want to look at it. If it's absolute value followed by a less than, it is an and you would split that up by writing an and inequality, and then you would solve that. So that's absolute value less than. Again, same numbers. X plus 5 is greater than 6. Obviously, if this one is an and, that one is an or inequality. So you would split that one up by writing x plus 5 is greater than 6, or x plus 5 is less than negative 6. So that one's kind of similar to the equations problem. At least 2 of those are on your test. So you'll have to know all 3 of them in order to get it right. But there are 2 of those type of problems on. Next thing I see, turning a sentence into an equation. That should be pretty simple. So it might say a number increased by 7 is equal to 4. And you have to actually write the equation out. And you'll have the answer choices there also. Several function problems where you might be given f of x equals x squared minus 2x, and they want you to find f of 3. So what do you do there to find f of 3? Plug 3 in for all the x's that you see there. So to solve that one, you would write 3 squared minus 2 times 3 and solve it out and get your answer. There will be a few of those on there. Going along with functions, which function is linear? And we wrote guidelines for that back in probably chapter 1 or 2. Chapter 2, I think, which function is linear. So there were some rules that had to be true or false, maybe, to determine whether a function was linear. Does anybody remember any of them? Shout them out if you got one. Variable can't be in a radical, or what else? The denominator. So it can't be the bottom of the fraction, or it can't be under a radical. What do you say, Helios? Which is almost right, but it can't have any exponents other than what? 1, right. And there was at least one more. Exactly. No variables multiplied. So that would be like if you saw an XY in there somewhere, that would not be linear. What? 4x is fine, that's not 2 variables. Standard form of a linear. So standard form, ax plus by equals c. You do have one of those on here where you have to convert it over. What else has to be true, though, besides just having those in the right spot? A can't be negative. And what else? No fractions. None of these can be fractions. A can't be negative, and you can't have any fractions. Find x and y intercepts. Now this is talking about a linear right now, but it could be anything. The rules are always the same for finding intercepts. How do we find the x-intercept? Make y 0 and solve. How do you find the y-intercept? Make x 0 and solve. So we'll have to do that as well. Find the slope given 2 points, like algebra 1, or even pre-algebra probably. Find the slope given 2 points. You'll need to know the slope formula. Parallel and perpendicular slopes. What do you know about the slopes of parallel lines? They are the same. Parallel lines slope the same. So if I tell you that it's parallel to a line that has a slope of 4, what's the slope of your line? 4 as well. Perpendicular, anybody remember? That's the one nobody ever gets. Opposite. Reciprocal. So if I tell you that one slope is 2/3 and your line is perpendicular to that, what would your slope be? -3/2. Opposite meaning it's negative, and 3/2 is the reciprocal. Make sure you can do that. And that part right there, both of those two things goes right along with writing equations of lines. And there's several of those where you have to write the equation of a line. Always using y equals mx plus b to write your equations. So you may have to find slope. You may be given 2 points, so you have to find the slope. And you can use any point you're given. You can plug in the y and the x there to figure out what b is. Or maybe they will just tell you the slope and the intercept. You would just plug those things in there. So that's usually one of the more difficult things. I said there were several of those. I thought there was, but I only see one. So there might be one later, but right now that's all I see. The next one is scatter plots. Well, we had one of those questions on that chapter test where you're given a graph and it's got plots here and they've actually got a line drawn, and then you have to pick the equation that best fits that line. So you'll have to figure out where is the y-intercept, about where is it crossing here, because that's your b, and then you kind of got to pick a couple of points and count the slope between them to figure out what your n is going to be, and then match that up with one of your equations. And there is one of those on your practice test. Solving systems, chapter 3. You got a couple of those, and you have several methods with which to solve those. And on the test, again, I don't care which method you use. Graphing is probably the best one. So if you're given two equations and it says to solve, that's what you're looking for. Where does it cross? Also have one with the three equations and three variables. So you'll have to know that as well. And that's pretty much all from chapter 3. You have 3 of those questions. And we go on then to matrices, which is chapter 4. What will you need to know how to do? You'll need to know how to add, subtract, and multiply matrices. Make sure you can do that. Find the inverse of a matrix. Determinants. And you have to do that for a 2x2 and a 3x3. There's one of both of those on there. So make sure you know how to do that using diagonals for the 3x3. Using those matrices for the triangle problems. So they're going to give you those 3 points, and you plug those into your matrix. And then this row is ones. You find the determinant. So there is one of those on there as well. And the rest is chapter 5, solving the quadratics. One of them is find the y-intercept. So that's, again, chapter 5 is quadratics. Find the y-intercept. That's one of your problems. Which way a parabola opens and whether you have a maximum or minimum. That was on the last test. Probably close to half of all of my classes didn't get that one right. So make sure you look that up, whether it opens up or down and has a maximum or a minimum. Find axis of symmetry and vertex. And that's it. There's several vertex problems. Oh, there's one solved by factoring. But again, even if it says to solve by factoring, I'm not going to know how you solved it. So whatever method works best for you. Those are the highlights. I will post all that stuff that I just wrote and said on the internet. So if you don't want to do it quickly, if you want to go back and look over any of that stuff, you'll have the opportunity to do that. So before you start your practice test, are there any questions about the test? It'll be tomorrow, same time as right now. We get out at 9:42, I think. So we'll have about 90 minutes tomorrow to get the test done. There are 33 multiple choice questions.